The Angry Chicken is a production of Amove TV. Bookmark amove.tv for more gaming and esports shows. The Angry Chicken is directly supported by listeners like you via patreon.com/TAC.
Everyone, get in here! Ready for action! I've got the beast in my sight.
A podcast about Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. This is The Angry Chicken.
Do not adjust that podcast dial. It is yet another episode of The Angry Chicken coming to you on the main feed because a ton of card nerfs was announced hours after the most recent episode posted, because I'm fairly certain at this point Team 5 is just messing with us.
They must be, because it used to be that they would post things on Tuesdays when we recorded on Mondays, so then we moved to Tuesdays, and now they're like, you know what? Wednesday's a nice day.
Wednesday sounds nice. But hey, we weren't, the worst affected, because we did talk about an IGN interview that just went up where they said, we're not sure yet. And they're liars! They're liars! They were sure! They knew what they were doing!
Yeah, stuff was happening. For sure. I mean, I'll bet, though, that interview happened, like, a while before the article came out, right? And then
that's actually very possible.
They definitely knew when they gave that interview, and they had to be a little bit coy. But
Dills,
you know what? Look,
Dills.
We do our show on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting Team 5 to schedule their announcements around our podcast. Like, they can put it out when they feel like they need to put it out. It's fine. It's all good. We'll get to it anyway, right?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Dills, because you're missing the point, man. You're supposed to get angry. You're supposed to get up in arms. You're supposed to say everything's a conspiracy, and they're out to get us, because that's how you get downloads. That's how you get subscribers. That's how you get.
This isn't the reasonable chicken, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just super happy about changes. I'm like, yes, these are good.
I'm
really happy about pretty much all of these. And
Yeah.
we had a lot of discussion on my stream last night about it. Some people are not. Some people think that some of these changes are pretty bad. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think.
I think they're all fantastic. So, hey, show's over. We'll see you. See you Tuesday, guys. All these changes are great and nothing but fantastic for the game. And there's no room for interpretation here. It's objectively just a good call. So, no, of course we're gonna sit here and we're gonna talk about it, guys. So, a couple cards have been slated for balance updates or changes or whatever. We like to call them nerfs, because all these cards we're about to talk about are getting nerfed. Hit with the Nerf bat, not gonna be as good as they used to be. But let's start up with the Shaman cards that are getting changed. And let's kick it off with probably the most unsurprising Shaman card that is being changed. Good old Tuskarr Totemic. Your 3 mana, 3 attack, 2 health. Fat Tuskarr that, 90% of the time summons a totem golem. He's getting changed. He's not going to cost any more mana. He's going to have the same attack. He's going to have the same health, but that battle cry is getting reined way in. The battle cry is going to be changed to read, summon a random basic totem.
Which I believe that's the change that, Dills, you were talking about. You wanted to see for the past little while, couple months probably.
I think the card is actually now completely fair. This is exactly what it always should have been. I know it was exciting when they announced it, and at the time when they announced the card, Shaman was in a pretty rough spot, right, as a class. So, because this is TGT,
This was
right?
the Grand Tournament, yeah.
And I remember we all thought when we saw the TGT cards, like, oh, this is the Shaman's time. Shaman has finally gotten here, but it wasn't until a few more cards got released that they actually did arrive. Yeah. So, at the time, it was totally fine. Now, Shaman has, gotten so many other good cards. This card, as it was then, in its current state, was just pushing the power level a little bit too much. And also, it sucks to have a game decided on turn 3, right? So that's really the problem here. And I think this card will still see a lot of play in totem-based Shamans.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's easy to see a nerf in any game, not just Hearthstone, and think, oh well, now this is no longer good, this is bad, whether it's your favorite hero in Heroes or Overwatch or whether it's a card in Hearthstone. But no, I think Tuskarr Totemic is totally fine. This is totally fine. You're getting 3/2 worth of stats and a random basic totem, which if you're playing Shaman, it's worth 2 mana. Not that that addition always necessarily matters or adds up correctly in the world of Hearthstone, but no, it's fine. Totally fine.
I think a hero power that didn't come through hitting the button, you could say is worth 1 mana. Right, because a lot, like if it gets bounced, they're all 1 mana, all the totems come 1 mana, right? So, and also like I think the fact that you didn't play a card and got to push the button is kind of what makes 2 mana fair for the hero power. But here it's like you didn't have to hit the button and you got so I think actually this is costed perfectly. I would call this an exact 3 cost card, and sometimes it's like whatchamacallit, what's the 2/3/1/1 with the boar? Sometimes it's exactly that card essentially, right, with the stats flipped. And then sometimes it's a 0/2 with like spell power or a taunt or something like that, which is actually pretty good. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think Tuskarr Totemic is it's one of those cards because they talk all the time about restricting their design space, and I think the Tuskarr Totemic is one of the cards that probably should have restricted their design space, but then it didn't. They went ahead with all their planned Shaman cards anyways, and that's why Shaman became so powerful, is because they had things like Thing from Below come out, and then it's like, oh my god, like this is actually amazing. You get a totem without having to actually pay any real mana for it, and you don't have to push the button and all the other things. So I think Shaman kind of snowballed out of control because they didn't restrict their design space like they probably should have, given Tuskarr Totemic being in the game.
Also, Spirit Claws now, 25% chance instead of 1 out of 7, right?
This is in a weird way a buff to Spirit Claws.
Yeah, so
as if it needed it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's fine. And that's what these are the kind of changes I like to see. They're not so heavy. This isn't the Warsong Commander change that we saw last year. This isn't putting this in the ground. Now, other cards in this round of changes, I believe, are getting put in the ground, but I think they should have been in the ground in the first place. But more on that later. Let's talk about the other Shaman cards getting a change, and one I did not see coming: Rockbiter Weapon. This is the base set, doesn't even have a rarity gem sitting in it. Been there since the dawn of time for Shaman. 1 mana, give a friendly character +3 attack this turn. It's getting changed to cost 2 mana.
This is the one I've seen people ticked off about. I don't know about you, Dills. Was this one of the ones?
No, most people were pissed about charge actually. But so this may seem to come out of left field a little bit, but the reason that this card got changed rather than say Doomhammer is this was the card that actually made Doomhammer such a problem, right? And also it's too good in too many different ways, right? It's just really like you can use it as early removal and as late game burst. And so this was the card that made Doomhammer, such a scary weapon. If you think about Doomhammer without this card, and people will still play this card as like the burst part of the Doomhammer combo, right? But now they won't be able to like remove something on turn 1 and play something and do all that kind of stuff that got them so far ahead in the first place to where you were low and then Doomhammer Rockbiter killed you. That will no longer be an option for them. Or if they do, they pay 2 mana, right? So
yeah, Alakir was a problem as well because at 8 mana, then you have the Wind Fury, and you could have put 2 Rockbiters on it for then 18 damage, I think.
Sure. Yeah,
so which was also a problem. This way, you can only do 12 damage out of hand.
But I like to see, I think this is good because I don't want them to change Doomhammer. It's so iconic for the Shaman class, right? A weapon that does Wind Fury, right? Like that's something that Shaman should have, right? And if you think about the card Doomhammer, it's totally fair on its own. It's just that when you could put double Rockbiter on it and do sick amounts of damage, then it becomes a problem. So as long as like that's not as easy to do, then sure, that card is fine. So I think this card, this being the way it is, also allows them to then in the future make more Wind Fury cards without then having to worry about Rockbiter making them broken, right?
Yeah. As much as this surprised me, and as someone who Shaman was the first class I really got into, it's weird, like coming to terms with this mentally. But I absolutely agree with everything you just said, Dills. I think this is, although I'm about to invoke the example of Blade Flurry, which we haven't actually seen any, I feel like, positive outcome from that change so far, but we assumed when Blade Flurry was changed that, so they can actually make fun and powerful weapons for rogues, and I still believe that's the case. We just haven't seen any yet. But I think that's what's exactly what's happening with Rockbiter. You know, it gives them they don't have to design
More
around
space,
it
yeah.
as much. It doesn't tie their hands.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, yeah, I think both of these changes I think are totally fair. I don't think either of these changes kills Shaman. I think Shaman is still probably going to be one of the top tier decks in the game, and you'll just adjust. You'll either play strict aggro Shaman now, because like right now you just saw that everyone was just kind of playing mid range at this point, right? And the other thing too is no matter which version you played, you put Tuskarr Totemic and Rockbiter weapon in the deck, whichever, no matter what type of Shaman you were playing, right?
yeah.
So I think that was the other issue, is like we need to make it so that there are choices to be made when playing Shaman, not just, okay, Tuskarr goes in, Rockbiter goes in, now what? But I think you'll still see Totem, mid-range Shaman, and aggro Shaman be very strong decks on the ladder.
Yeah,
So,
I wish they had gone a little deeper into why certain choices were made, because on the subject of Rockbiter weapon, in the blog post, they said that they considered Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, but they're leaving standard relatively soon. Well, so was Tuskarr Totemic. And I'm not saying I disagree. I think Tuskarr Totemic was just objectively broken. It was ridiculous. But I'm curious as to why. It's like, well, Tuskarr Totemic's also going away at the same time as Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, so, you know, what in their minds, do they just agree? I mean, I'm assuming since the choice was made that they also kind of thought, yeah, Tuskarr Totemic, a little too strong. But
you know, though, a lot of people, and we talked about this on the show when we were kind of predicting what we might see as far as changes, that you could just like throw things into Wild. But the more I started thinking about it, I don't want that to be the answer.
No.
I don't want them to just treat Wild like, well, whatever. Throw it in Wild because no one cares, right? I never want that to be the case. So the cool thing here is like Tuskarr Totemic, when it goes to Wild, will be a fair card there too, right? So it's not going to like
That's actually a
go
really
to
good
Wild
point.
and then make broken combos because there's all sorts of totems that we don't have in Standard and Wild. Like that's a future I don't want, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, and that's something I've been coming to terms with in terms of Yogg Saran, which we'll talk about at the end. We're saving that for the end. Some
yeah,
things
that's
to
the
say on
meat and
that.
potatoes of today's
Meat
episode, I
and
think.
potatoes, and I know there's
feel-
a big chunk of our listenership that doesn't even, they're just like, I don't care, just Yogg, kill it, fine. Don't even want a eulogy, but we'll talk about that at the end.
I feel like this way, it means that no matter what they do and no matter how long Wild is a format, you know, no matter how many sets rotate out, this makes Tuskarr Totemic just stable. You know, otherwise it would just always get worse and worse and worse and worse, because the chances of getting whatever you wanted in a totem are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as they add more totems to the game. So this way, Tuskarr Totemic stays stable throughout the
It is
cycle.
what it is,
yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
Like right now, actually, in Wild, it's worse than Standard because
Yes,
Vitality
because
Totem is something you don't want, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Oh God, I didn't think about that. I haven't played Shaman in Wild, so it's a good point. Let's talk about the one hunter card that's getting changed. Call of the Wild, Mr. Called it of the Wild is more like it. So yeah, Call of the Wild, summon all 3 animal companions, used to cost 8 mana when this update goes live, which we actually don't know when it's going live yet, right?
I
We don't know,
think
but
so.
I would predict
Okay.
Tuesday coming up.
I think so too. Although didn't the arena patch go live on like a Thursday or something?
It went on
So-
live on a Thursday, but they wanted on a Tuesday. It got pushed back. So.
Gotcha.
I mean, that could happen again. I don't know. But I don't know what else would be in this patch other than these changes.
Yeah. So anyway, when this update goes live, this Call of the Wild is going to cost 9 mana. So it's nothing else has changed. It just costs a reasonable amount of mana for the absurdity that.
It's still a really good card.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we talked about it, and I had mentioned that this card should cost 12 mana, that's a little over exaggerated. I think, you know, because each of these cards on their own, the actual animal companions, if you consider them, I'd say they're all worth about 3.5 mana on their own. But when you put them all together, they're all worth slightly more because they actually synergize with each other, right?
Yeah.
You know, like Leok gets protected by Misha. Leok also buffs her for like a 5/2 with charge, right? So I would say this card is worth about 10.5 mana, and maybe 11. But so it's still a really good card, right? Whenever you're paying less than what it should cost, that's a good card. So I think you'll still see probably 2 of every time you see a hunter.
This is going nowhere in my hunter decks. My hunter decks are staying the same. I'm just going to be a little more patient.
Well, yeah, this basically just pushes your Call of the Wild on 8 and 9 to 9 and 10. And really what it does is it gives your opponent one more turn to deal with your high mains. But I know, you know, when I get a really good draw as a hunter, I'm dropping a high main on 6, a high main on 7, and then I'm Call of the Wilding on 8. So
the game,
yeah, like, I mean, this isn't really going to change that too much. I'm probably still, as a hunter, going to have things on the board. It's going to be difficult to deal with. This is fine. This is not a take it out of your decks nerf at all.
But think about this, though. Now you can't, you'll no longer be able to say Call of the Wild and Quick Shot, or Call of the Wild and something else, right? It's going to be Call of the Wild, that's my turn.
Yeah.
Call of the Wild hero power. Like, even that, sometimes allows you to close the game out. Where now that's just Call of the Wild is your turn. 9 mana cards are pretty much your turn in almost every scenario.
Yeah, and I think that's fine.
There is one scenario. It's Call of the Wild, and oh my god, I still have a coin.
Sure, yeah, but that doesn't happen that often. Honestly, too, I know a lot of people are like, "Hey, I'll just save my coin. I'll play this on 8 still." You probably don't want to do that.
Yeah,
your coin is worth more early on in the game, because it's a larger percentage of the total mana pool being played. So, dude, use your coin, man. I see people like hoarding their coins all the time. I'm like, it's so bad late in the game. Use it right away.
I mean,
there are. Kumo in the chat room is also saying, turn 8 Medivh, turn 9 Call of the Wild is pretty sick. So yeah, just slot Medivh
9 mana minions. You'd get like Ysera now. You'll get
King Crush.
Oh, King Crush.
Disgusting. Sure. Absolutely disgusting.
Seems good.
Well, let's move on. Let's talk about the warrior cards that were changed. More than one, actually. Hey, charge. Charge, everyone knows it. It's been around forever. Again, no rarity gem in there. It's a basic card. Been around since the beginning. Costs 3 mana and gives a friendly minion +2 attack and charge. It's now going to cost 1 mana, and it reads completely different. It now is going to read, give a friendly minion charge. It can't attack heroes this turn.
Yep. So no more going face with charge. No more game-ending combos with charge. Although, do you guys remember charge used to be 0 mana, right? Wasn't it? So. It's just a 0 mana give a creature charge.
I don't actually.
First incarnation.
I don't actually remember that.
And then people would do the Gore Howl into Alexstrasza, give Alexstrasza charge, deal the last 15 damage with Gore Howl and Alexstrasza.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, that was one of the first like OTK-ish kind of decks, right? Even though you needed some setup. So the thing here is they've hated charge for a long time. And
I don't think it's that and I'm seeing that segment. I don't think it's
charge as a mechanic,
right? I don't think they hate charge. I think they hate the ability to give charge to any minion. I think charge is fine, and I think they think charge is fine, but they would rather have a lot more control over what minions can get charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what they don't like is the big one-turn kill decks that we've talked about before. Is, anytime we see something happening like that where turns are just non-interactive and very swingy, whether it's one-turn kill or whether it's like a board full of patrons, one way or another, they don't like these things where it makes your opponent feel like they're just sitting there and they can't do anything no matter how they played through the entire game. All of a sudden, they're just dead or
which is
in a position they can't recover from.
Which is exactly why we're seeing nerfs to freeze mage cards. Oh, wait, no, we still aren't.
Well, and that's
we did.
That's the other thing. Yeah,
they all got nerfed at one point. So basically the thing here is like OTK-ish combos are okay, but the particular ones that you were able to get out of charge were just a little over the top, right? So the Worgen could do 60 damage in a turn with just a single Worgen, single charge, and then some like buff cards and a Faceless Manipulator. And that's like something that cannot be played around, right? Not to mention the fact that they also have such efficient removal, such efficient draw mechanics. They're able to reliably draw through the entire deck. You can't kill them because they gain armor while they're drawing cards. So there's just like very little counterplay to this other than like plopping down a taunt minion at the right time. But so if every deck is forced to then run like a single taunt minion, that's not really that good either to deal with one deck. The other thing too is that like charge in a game like Hearthstone works way differently than any other card game out there. You can't like charge in Magic the Gathering would be fine, right? Because they're like, oh, and then I do this thing and I give it charge, and you're like, block. You can't do that in Hearthstone. There's no the attacker is the one who makes all of the calls. The person whose turn it is the only person making anything happen, and you just sit there and watch it happen. So because of that fact, you really have to be careful what you allow people to do all in one turn in a game like Hearthstone. Magic, you can be a little bit more flippant. You can be like, hey, crazy stuff, because the other guy could just say, "Yeah, I got a token, I block," right? So
yeah, or counterspell, or anything.
or counterspell. Yeah, you have to be a little more careful in Hearthstone, and I think this is finally like, okay, this is not working. We shouldn't have this card do what it does. Let's just get rid of this so we can move forward with our lives, right?
Yeah. So I'm happy with this change. I get it, and again, I don't think it's an attack on charge. I think it's attack on Raging Worgen. That's what this change is. So it's not.
By the way, there are still uses for this card. I could think of uses for this card.
Oh,
You could charge your Sylvanas. You could, people in chat right now, you could charge your Grim Patrons into stuff, right? And immediately start making more Grim Patrons.
Yeah, again, this is one of those changes where I look at it, I'm like, well, there's possibilities with this now. It's only 1 mana. That's not a high. It's not asking a lot of me. I mean, it is taking a slot in my deck, which is always, an exercise when you only have 30 cards. But no, I think it's fine. I liked Noxious's tweet yesterday. He's like, I'm busting out my Magnetar Alpha, ladies and gentlemen.
Sure, yeah, that's like a board clear right there.
Yeah.
You have 5/3 and you deal 5 to 3 minions at the same time. Like, yeah, that's pretty good.
It is 2 cards, but if you get 3 minions with it, bring it on. Sign me up.
How about Boogie Monster? Charge Boogie Monster, start building him up.
Oh my
god. Charge if you could get like a Sandworm somehow. Hunter card, you could just start running them into everything, right? Yeah.
I loved watching your mental gymnastics. You're like, Sandworm, if you could get it.
If you can get one.
Yeah. Oh,
it'll be sick.
It's great. Well, that's not the only warrior card getting changed. Execute is also getting changed. It's no longer going to cost 1 mana. It's going to cost you 2 mana to destroy a damaged enemy minion. And
I think that's fair.
I think it's fair too, but again, this is not one I saw coming.
No, this card's been around forever, right? And nobody ever really talked about it being necessarily some oppressive broken card, but
yeah,
it is really, really efficient.
It's been good since day one, and as more whirlwind effects have been added to this game, its value has just skyrocketed in Warrior.
This doesn't change Control Warrior at all because Control Warrior floats so much mana, right? So they still are going to use the Execute pretty much the same way they always have. But I think the issue here is that in Tempo Warrior and Dragon Warrior and all these other types of warriors, being able to also being able to kill anything for 1 mana and then develop your board in the same turn was making those decks a little overpowered, I think. So now they'll have to make some harder choices in say on turn 6, right? You can't just execute something and then play a 5-drop. You're going to have to execute and play a 4-drop. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, they mentioned in their comments that this was made to bring it closer in power level to other existing removal tools, but also future removal tools, which makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree with their thought process on this card.
Do we disagree with
any minion 2 mana? That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here just asking. Do we disagree with any of the changes made? I don't think we're gonna.
I don't. Personally, I mean, I guess if I disagree with anything, there's some other cards they probably could have changed, but they didn't. So, but this is a pretty good set that I'm looking at. So.
Yeah, to the closest thing I get is I understand charge. I'm totally down with it, but I think I still don't understand why they haven't done anything to Freeze Mage if their whole issue is things being fun and interactive. I don't understand.
I'm sure it has to do with their stats on it, right? They probably think the stats on the OTK Warrior were showing that card was a problem, and Freeze Mage is not currently.
Probably, but
something like that. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I'd like to talk to him about it.
Sure.
Hey, Ixar, if you're
feels
listening.
bad to play against Freeze Mage, that's for sure. To just never do anything with your cards, play them and just have them sit there, that feels bad.
Yeah. So moving on to the neutral card that blew my mind the most that was changed. Abusive Sergeant is losing 1 attack. That's it. Although it also looks like, if you look at, and this is completely visual, so sorry audio listeners, but pull up the image on the official Hearthstone website if you haven't looked at this. They did change the layout of the text on his battle cry. It is now they have split the amount of space between the lines and the verbiage more evenly, and I love it. My graphic design innards are smiling.
Put the +2 a little bit further down, so it's not jutting up against the edge of the card. Good job.
Yep. Good job, guys. Good job. But yeah, so it's now going to be a 1/1 for 1 that gives a minion +2 attack this turn.
So this is in line with, say, like Leper Gnome now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with this change too, because this is still a really good card for like a zoo deck, right? But it's now not like an auto include in, say, an aggro deck, right? An aggro deck is now going to have to think about this. And this is one of the cards where every aggro deck in the world just goes, okay, 2 abusive sergeants go in, and that's, I think, the problem. It's when a card is just universally put into every single type of deck that does that thing, then that card is probably a little bit of a problem. So I think this is fine. It's such a slight nerf, right? It still does what it does. And then nobody
was running Abusive Sergeant for its 2 attack. They were running it for the 2 attack that it adds to another minion that can attack this turn.
Yeah, but you could also, in an aggro deck, just plop this down on turn 1 and feel okay about it. Now you won't feel that good about it, right? So you probably won't, actually. You probably won't ever play this on turn 1 as just a 1/1, because now the battle cry is the value part of this card completely.
Yeah, so, I mean, at that point, you might as well just play a Wisp.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you're just dropping it and not getting battle cry value, Christ, just play a Wisp. What are you doing, son? It's Wisp Town.
But yeah, I mean, this card will still be in zoo decks because 1 mana buff, like 1 mana buffers, like that's a pretty big deal. This card will probably still be in all the aggro decks anyway, just because of adding damage to the turn and leaving a body behind that then has to be dealt with, right? So, yeah, and I don't see this card going anywhere. I think this is a fair change.
Yep.
It brings aggro, maybe it reins it in just a touch, right?
Yep.
And they did mention in the post aggro might be a little too strong.
Yeah. And a shaman has cast Lightning Storm outside, so if this goes down randomly without any warning, that's what happened.
Okay.
Storming like crazy out of nowhere. Anyways, final card to discuss. The big thing is Yogg Saron.
Here we go.
Okay, so if you look at the card, nothing has changed. Still reads the same, still costs the same mana, still has the same attack, still has 5 health. But the big important thing that's changing with Yogg Saron is Yogg will no longer cast spells. It will stop casting if Yogg Saron is destroyed, if he is silenced, transformed, or returned to your hand. So anything happens to Yogg Saron other than he is on the damn board and is not silenced or transformed, it will stop casting spells. So, and
they also mentioned that they will be adding Overload. It sounds like they have to do a little bit of heavy lifting to actually fix that, but they will in the future say when you cast an overload spell, you actually get overloaded.
I would like to yield the floor to Jocelyn, who I know is shaking with a butt.
Why? What?
Earlier when you texted me.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, when they originally were talking about Yogg Saron and how it interacted with all the different things, and before I make this point, like 18,000 people on Twitter have pointed this out for me, but I am not talking about Ben Brode on stream with Frodan. I am talking about clarifications made later on by tweets and blue posts and everything else, talking about how Yogg Saron was the one doing the casting. The casting was coming from your side of the board, so therefore your character did not get overloaded. So I feel like making those clarifications at that point and then calling it a bug now is inconsistent and weird. Yes.
but I would like Yogg to essentially be casting the spells like for you, right? And I think that's the way I imagined him always kind of working. And I know that that's, they did literally say that. Oh, it's Yogg casting spells, right? But I always thought like, hey, it would be really cool if all of the things in the spells work the way you expect them to work as if you cast the spells, right? So like there's a few things that were bizarre, right? Like combos didn't go off, so Eviscerate always hit for 2. If like Rocket Load was cast, you didn't get cards.
Things,
yeah, Astral Communion would still
would affect your
hand,
mana,
though.
Which I think that is not only get rid of your hand, but it affects your mana tray, which is weird because then it's just I don't know.
Yeah, because that was the thing. It was like it works.
It works on your mana, but Overload didn't. Yeah.
Some stuff worked correctly, and some stuff did not, and that's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
So Sylvanas stealing it, all of a sudden the other guy's casting the spells. Okay, cool. Why the hell are we not overloading? Why the hell are we not getting cards from Lock and Load? Why the hell are we not? You know what I mean? Like none of that made sense. So I think let's get that first in order, and then I think this change to Yogg. I think also we talked about. This makes sense too. Like Yogg's not there anymore, dude. What is that? How is he still doing stuff?
And I think that really the overload change is almost a bigger nerf than the basically if he's not there, he stops casting. Because if you think about it, that takes a whole pool of spells that were more powerful than they should have been, and so therefore more positive for you than they should have been. It takes that big pool out of the positives, puts them in the negatives, because now you're going to get overloaded. So
there's a potential that you could be completely locked out the following turn if you get enough overload
you lose
cards.
turn 10 and turn 11, right?
If you're really, really, really unlucky, there is a chance that you could be locked out of your turn completely, or at least significantly. And I think that that's a bigger downside than the chance that he'll stop casting, because I feel like if you're taking the chance that he'll stop casting, maybe that just pushes your threshold of, okay, I need to maybe cast 2 or 3 more spells or something. There's ways to play around that. But when you take so many positive spells and really overpowered spells and put them in the negative column, I feel like that's a bigger negative change to Yogg. And I feel like that's what pushes him out of tournaments a little bit more so. Even then, when he's no longer Yogg.
Well, yeah, but he'll be out of tournaments just based on that one change, though, just because you can't take the chance of casting a bunch of spells throughout a game and playing Yogg, having him kill himself on the first spell and doing nothing, right? You pay 10 mana to literally do nothing sometimes. There's no way that's going to be something that a competitive player will now take a chance on, right? So just that change alone. By the way, chat's also talking, I think it should work this way. They should make it so that Yogg literally works it's casting spells for you. I think if you have an auctioneer on the board, you should draw every single time you cast a spell. I think if you have a mana worm on the board, you should buff your mana worm. I think Flamewaker should shoot little missiles. All of it. Yogg is now casting spells for me. And then when Yogg dies, he stops. This card will be gone from competitive play, by the way, which is
absolutely.
Great.
Well, and I haven't actually, I'm going to make the exact same comment that I made when Yogg was first announced. I haven't seen the stats on this, so I know that everyone's gut reaction is, okay, it's just gone from tournaments. I would like to see someone actually do the stats of how many cards there are that could possibly kill him and stop your chances, and do the stats on that to see if it's still a competitive risk. Because the chances of him killing himself the very first spell that you cast are probably fairly slim.
Pretty low.
Yeah. So
it is common where Yogg doesn't survive the turn. If you play a lot of Yogg decks, you realize that happens pretty, I'd say about half the time at least.
He's designed that way, right? That's why he has such a small health pool. And actually, I find that interesting that now they've made this change, but then they also haven't buffed his health pool at all. So I thought that, if they were going to do that, they might give him, make him a 7/7 instead, just to make it that little bit harder so that he can't just, be fireballed or, any of the other removal, single target removal tends to come in 5s and 6s, not 7s. So, that would still make it competitively playable.
But we don't want it competitively playable. That's the point.
And that's the thing.
They don't want it competitively playable, and neither do we. That's the whole point of this: is get them out of our tournaments.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you can, they say in the blog post, they want to reduce the amount it gets seen in tournaments. But I think there's a difference between reducing the amount and taking it out of competitive play completely, because they've taken it out of competitive play completely.
And I'm okay with that.
I am too. I've seen the sentiment a lot in the last 2 days, Jocelyn. You're clearly not alone in your opinion. I've seen this a lot on Twitter, but clearly, I think they just want to kill it. I don't think the intention was ever, and they said right at the top, we felt like seeing Yogg in tournaments was not where we originally hoped it would end up. I think that says
it all. And by the
way,
you'll still be able to have a great time with Yogg. All the people who just want to play for fun and have Yogg, it will still be super fun. I played a bunch of Yogg decks last night on stream. I was like, okay, we found out Yogg's changing. Let's have a big Yogg send-off, right? I'm going to play nothing but Yogg decks from here on out. And I'll be honest, he didn't kill himself that often. And I was casting him with 15 spells. And I'm like, hey, at the end of this, he would have still, this would have happened. I was kind of keeping track of how often it would have happened. So on the ladder, when you're just messing around, you'll still have a great time with Yogg. Everyone who's rip Yogg, oh God. Are you going to BlizzCon? No? Then it's not rip Yogg. Have fun, dude. You can still have fun. It's not the end of the world. Yogg will be fine. You'll have your fun decks and it'll be cool. But now he's more like a major domo, right? Or something like that, where it's this card sucks, but it's so fun sometimes. That's where Yogg should be.
Yeah. And you get a Jocelyn emote with Major Domo if you're lucky.
That's true. That's true.
Exactly. But it's like ETC or, there's lots of these like kind of fun legendaries that are out there.
There's tons of them.
Never
there's
go
a lot
anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot of legendaries that are just not good. Legendary does not equal good. I mean, we talked about that a million times. I think the discussion with Yogg is what your opinion is. If you think Yogg should be competitive or not. Team 5 clearly doesn't think so. I sure as hell don't think so. Dills, you don't think so. Jocelyn, you're more in the middle ground.
Well, I agree. I don't want to see him in tournaments all the time, but you've got to admit when you see him once in a while, it is very exciting to watch the Yogg turns happen. It's when the Yogg turns are happening in every single game because, it's in Mage, it's in Druid, it's, everyone's bringing it. Some people are sticking it in decks that just have some spells because they want some sort of a chance at a comeback mechanic. Like, that's a problem. So I can see that. I wish that it was still potentially competitively playable in like a deck or two, as opposed to the way that it's just kind of been auto included in a lot of tournament decks as a comeback mechanic.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean,
yeah,
for me, I always felt that it should have been just a fun card. And when we originally saw it, that's what we thought, right? That was our gut reaction when we saw Yogg, like, this is crazy, but this is going to be so inconsistent. This is just for fun theme decks. You can go have a blast, play with your buddy, be like, yeah, I played Yogg. Oh no, I can't believe you played that horribly inconsistent card.
I said stats.
Yeah, okay, but again, to me, like, it just comes down to this was not the point. This was so far off base from what they intended for this card to do, and they're even admitting it at this point. So I don't know. I feel quite vindicated in my opinion when it comes to Yogg and in this particular,
I'm just going to point something out though. In competitive play, you're just not going to see that much variation. Period. You're not going to see whether Yogg's there or not. Like, the legendaries you do see are a small pool of legendaries. The decks you do see are a fairly small pool of decks. That's just how it works, right? When you're at the highest level, the people play what's the best, and because they're all trying to win. So as fun as it would be, if here and there we saw a Yogg, it's either gonna be there a lot or not at all. Like, that's just how it works at the highest level, right? Like, you don't go to a poker tournament. Like, you might see the guy splash around with the bad hands, but that guy's out of the tournament pretty fast, right? And then the guys who play really good are the ones who get, like, it's the same thing here. Like, the people who play the correct decks in the correct way and all that kind of stuff, those are the ones you're going to see at the end. They're going to be playing that.
I guess
it's not how it's going to work ever.
I would like to see Yogg somehow as maybe like a tech card where some players choose to include it, some players choose not to, that sort of a thing. Whereas, but
it's just not that kind of card. Like, it's not a big game hunter. It's not a Harrison Jones. It's its own thing. It's either going to be like amazing because it's, casts like 20 spells and generally this is what happens, or it's just not going to be in any decks, right?
Yeah, so I think this is actually a good non-sarcastic time to invoke Ben Brode's Soul of the Card. But the Soul of Yogg isn't a tech card, just the way that this functions. Yeah, I think you would have to make him a card where he is in and out depending on the meta. You'd have to completely change what he is. And that personally, I mean, I've mentioned on the show multiple times now that I either wanted him not change that much or just go to Wild Unchanged because I'd like the insanity that ensues. But this is I like you said earlier, Dills. Wild should be relatively balanced as well.
Yeah, like, it should be crazy, but it should be within reason, right? Like, we shouldn't just use that as this is our grave site for all cards that we didn't want to play in Standard. Like, so now it's just like, who knows what the hell is happening over. Like, I want it to still be considered like somewhat serious place to play. Like, for the people who like that kind of stuff, they could go over there and do that kind of stuff there.
It would have
but
been...
I think people are overblowing though, like how much this weakens Yogg. I think it's still like Yogg is actually still going to be good in your fun decks. I played a bunch. Like, I know this is all anecdotal evidence, but I played a bunch of Yogg last night, and every time he didn't die, I was like, look, see, that would have still happened, and that happened pretty often. Like, I was still totally fine. I would probably still play some Yogg Druid on the ladder when I feel like having a good time,
I think
and I'll probably still win a decent amount of the time.
Yeah, our resident math guy, Rational Pi, in the chat room said somebody did do all the stats on new Yogg, and apparently he casts on average 6 spells.
But okay,
It's
wait.
fine.
Cast 6 spells. Like what? But I need the math on how often he kills himself. I think that's the math we need, right?
Well, and that's the thing.
average
So
spells.
he'll cast on average 6 spells before killing himself or polymorphing or whatever. So
Oh, he'll cast 6 spells before he dies.
yes.
Okay.
I think the
And then so
that's
like
the average
then you
amount
have
of-
to figure out if you're only casting 6 spells, is that still good? Which I can't remember. I think the stats were you need to cast somewhere between 8 and 10 to get a reliable board clear in general from original Yogg stats. And again, that's not taking into account overload. So
By the way, though, you may also see that Yogg is now no longer good with, say, 15 spells, but now people will only try to cast maybe 5 to 7 spells, period, right, before they cast Yogg. And then they know what they're going to get out of Yogg. So you don't use them the way you did now, where now you just cast spells throughout the entire game, and then you were like, oh, am I behind? Okay, Yogg.
Yogg, yeah.
Now you might do it like, okay, I've cast 5 or 6 spells. This is
Actually
the
play
perfect
him
time to
turn
Yogg,
10, yeah.
right? Yeah, like it might just be that he changes how he's used, right? Because how he's used now is just kind of ridiculous. Like, game's not going my way, emergency. And it could be that he gets, he gets still seen, but used differently.
Yeah,
we don't
more
know.
strategic, yeah.
We'll have to, once the good player, if the good players figure out that he's still okay, he will still get used. Just, we'll see.
Yeah, I do think it would have been an interesting precedent to set if they had moved him to wild, because so far that hasn't happened. That's the one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting in the decision that they made. So they still have not made the decision to send anything to wild earlier than originally stated.
Yeah. Which, if that happens, I think needs to be a pretty extreme case, right?
Yeah.
Because it needs to be a card that they're unwilling to change, but a card that is causing a problem to standard, right?
Yeah.
Like, what card is that? Do we have
Well,
that
I
card
feel
currently?
like
Probably not. Yogg would be the closest.
I was going to say, if it turns out that this doesn't have the impact that they thought it would, if it turns out that statistically it's still a competitive card, we might see it happen to Yogg. If they're just like, okay, there's really nothing that we can do to this card and keep the same flavor, the same sort of thing, all the random spells, move it to wild, I think Yogg is the card. I think that the results of this change in competitive play are going to dictate what happens to Yogg and what happens to their not moving it to wild stance.
You know what, though? Even if it does still see play in competitive, I think it's actually more exciting now to watch, because now you know it might kill itself at any moment, right? So I don't know. I think it's even more interesting, because before it was like, oh, and it killed itself, but here we go, we're still going. Like, it didn't really matter, right? So
That's a good point. Yeah, because part of for me, the reason I enjoy seeing Yogg go off is it's that nail biting sensation, right? You're just like,
sure,
is it going to be good for the one player, or is it going to be good for the other? And in this case, there's that added layer of, is it just going to murder itself? So,
yeah. Like, what's going to happen next? That is what's cool about Yogg, right? So now there's even more to that, honestly, especially if it works consistently. And I think too, like with this change, let's make it all work consistently, right? All the other things we talked about, all that stuff should work as if you're casting the spells. I think that'd be cool.
I think it needs to go one way or another. Either it's Yogg and your side of the board casting the spells, and so your mana doesn't get changed at all.
But then you shouldn't even be drawing cards,
minions,
too.
Yeah,
like, you
and your
shouldn't be
minions
doing any
don't
of
draw,
that,
and
right?
yeah, exactly. And you don't draw cards. Or it's your player casting, and then all of the effects therefore happen. I think it needs to go one way or the other, because right now, exactly, there's no consistency. Shocker, but
Like bizarre.
Yeah.
Which, it's so weird, like how many things are just bizarre in the Hearthstone world, and we just accept, right? And we just go,
Yeah.
well, that's just how it works. And you're like, but why? That's not what it says.
Because Hearthstone.
Yeah, because Hearthstone, guys. Because of discovery. Put on
Yeah.
your safari hats, guys. Let's go. I don't mean to throw shade at Bembro, but that it's just funny to it's funny to me. Anyway,
Yeah.
we've talked about this before.
No, well said. So, I think a good way to end this talk is I did tweet out on the Angry Chicken account yesterday who will give the eulogy at Yogg Saron's funeral, and we got some fun responses. Would you like to hear some of the best ones?
Sure.
Absolutely.
At Brother Nod wrote, "Eye for an eye, because now it will go back into obscurity."
Oh.
Oh, so sad. So sad. At the Farron said, a random selection of cards will give the eulogy based on the number of spells you cast.
Okay. Not bad.
Yep. Well, where was the next one? Malagos will be crying great big sparkling tears that destroy several nearby villages.
He's like, I'm going to have to win games all by myself now? No.
I had a friend.
I have my buddy Yogg.
And I think the most correct one is at B. Martin wrote, the Ghost of Warsong Commander.
By the way, funny thing, I oftentimes would go from killing Yogg, and then we'd go run off and kill Malagos real quick right afterwards in, like, WoW rating. I never even thought about that connection.
Malagos nerfing coming?
Yeah, because, like, but Malagos was, like, one boss raid, and so sometimes you'd finish Ulduar, and you'd be like, well, let's go, just go kill Malagos real quick.
Why not? Just for fun.
Yeah.
Just for enchanting mats at this point, because there ain't nothing in there we need.
I don't think I've ever actually killed Malagos.
Really?
It was a fun
you
fight.
get in there and do it.
My
I think there's some
word-
good
my world
transmogs in there.
Yeah, you got to surf around on these cool crystalline discs.
Although you don't really do that anymore now. You just kind of murder him in the sky, and then...
I've done that then, yeah. I just forgot. Oh,
Yeah.
poor
But
Malagos.
then, so yeah, the Yogg or the Malagos encounter involved the most flying on things of any encounter before or after, because you would fly around on the discs, and then you'd fly around on dragons afterwards. So
Yep.
like the whole time you were riding on something, and the whole time you're on a big circular disc in the middle of nowhere. So
Yep.
Until it blew
I
up.
do remember that now. Yeah, because I had to actually get on one of those discs because there was an achievement.
yes.
Oh, well,
That
fantastic.
was a fun fight though.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that. I remember, because this is back in the day when I wouldn't read about encounters beforehand, like hearing the stories of, yeah, you jump on these flying things and fly around, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. And then I got in and saw it for the first time, and I was like, this actually is amazing.
Yeah. Dude, there was so many cool things. As a hunter, I would have to shoot, the sparks that would come in slowly, and I would have to like drag them to the spot, shoot them down, because then they would put a buff on the ground, so you could actually do enough damage to Malagos, and then you get inside the bubbles, there'd be damage everywhere. It was super cool.
Super sweet.
Super cool fun.
Super freaking sweet. Well, that'll do it for this special episode of The Angry Chicken, talking about the upcoming card nerfs. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We don't have show notes, which means we don't have iTunes thanks. We don't have specific patrons to thank, but thank you to all our patrons over at patreon.com/TAC for supporting us so we can do this extra content. Thank you to our producers, Declan H. and Peter Williams. Dills, without having your usual pimpage in front of you, do it from your head. Where can folks find you?
Check me out on Twitter. I'm at Willie Dills. YouTube.com/WillieDillsSF. I actually just put a video up yesterday on just my thoughts alone on all these changes. So if you aren't satiated by our conversation and you need even more, you can go check that out. YouTube.com/WillieDillsSF. And then the stream, of course, Twitch.tv/WillieDillsSF. I will probably do a short one tonight of my Dills Hearthstone League match, but I got to go visit with people. So tomorrow we'll be back for a big full stream.
Fantastic. Jocelyn, how about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at Joss Plays, and you can find me on AMove TV every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern doing The Gamers In.
You can find me on Twitter at Garrett Art and everything at amove.tv. Check out Embrace of Spoilers. Joss and I, spoiling World of Warcraft Legion. New episode just went up this Tuesday. Go check that out. And don't forget, we're sponsored by HelloFresh.com. This is technically part 2 of the episode that went up yesterday. So go over there, use the code TAC, get $35 off your first week of deliveries, get fresh food ready to cook straight to your door. It's fantastic. We thank HelloFresh.com for their support. We thank you all for listening. And until Tuesday, unless yet another giant piece of news drops tomorrow, job's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.
Yes, Yogg is dead. All right.